Welcome to Betting People, but with a twist. Usually, the man on your screen would be interviewing a range of big names and big punches from the racing world, but today I, William Kedjanyi, am interviewing the interviewer's master, Simon Nott. Simon, thank you for inviting me here.
Thank you, William. Thank you.
Right, so
boots on the other foot.
Indeed, and what a big boot to wear, because looking through before you got into racing, before you started interviewing, it's a fascinating backstory. You went travelling, and you used to be a real punk rocker, because I can see all of the CDs behind you. Talk to us a bit about your music, first of all.
It's just my love, apart from the racing, really. I've always been into music in one form or another, and started getting involved listening when I could first afford to buy sort of records to begin with. And I got involved with travelling around with a few bands and trying to promote a few things in local pubs, that sort of stuff. So and I'm still collecting now. I love all the 50s, 60s, that sort of obscurity, 70s punk I grew up with. I was 12 years old when God Save the Queen came out. We used to sit and wait and hope that the radio presenter would make a mistake and play it because it was banned, that sort of thing, And then Elvis died, so all the rock and roll suddenly became more acceptable. So so I love music. That's my passion, apart from the racing.
Were you in any bands when you were younger?
No, I'm not. I've got a double bass and a guitar which I can play barely. I'm more of a fan than a practitioner.
Speaking also about your past, you went on a fair bit of travelling. You've been here, there and everywhere, not just down under, but also you've been to the Far East. You've seen, I think, sort of big international races as well. Tell us about your first travels to Australia.
Well, I just had a bit of a wobble in my 30s. I decided to sell everything, which wasn't much, and took off the day after the Go Cup in 2000. Me and a mate flew off to Singapore. I was racing at Kranji the next night. Travelled around Thailand for a bit, then went to Australia. I was just turned up at early days of the internet, and somebody said, if you're ever in Sydney, give me a call. I gave him a call, and he was quite surprised that I had. Went to his place. Turned out his girlfriend was in Home and Away, so sort of hanging around with the Home and Away people. And he was in a band, so I was basically doing band stuff all the time, going to gigs every night. Got a bit of work over there, and went to the Melbourne Cup with a brew, won it, and it was sponsored by Foster's. I should have backed it, shouldn't I? But I didn't, obviously.
What was international racing like in those days? Because now, obviously, it's a normal given thing. People go all the time from here. Back in those days, could you notice any differences between then and now?
Well, to be honest, it doesn't seem that long ago, even though it was, 19 years ago now. The main thing, it was just open at 7:30 in the morning, and I'd arranged. I got the overnight train down from Sydney to Melbourne, and I arranged to meet a bookie. Naively, from the local West Country bookie, John Tovey, and I said, I'll meet you in the nearest bar to the bookies, thinking it was going to be like in the UK. Well, there's bars with bookies there's bookies all over the place, so we never, even though he was there, we didn't actually bump into each other. So that was a thing. And also ladies queuing up for the men's toilets was the first time I've seen that, but that's quite common over here now as well. So it was a brilliant, the Melbourne Cup. It's something else. I mean, I'd love to go again at one point, but it's a party from morning till night,
Did you ever go to Japan when you were...
No, I went racing in Thailand, went to the Bangkok Race Club in Thailand, which I don't think is actually there anymore. And just the Melbourne Cup. So that was the two. I've been told when I went to India, I went racing in Bangalore and Mumbai as well, and that was quite interesting because it was in January and a lot of the UK jockeys were riding over there, Paul Edry, people like that. So that was quite it's like a bit old colonial throwback sort of thing in those race courses.
Now, after those travels, when you came back, you arrived just in time for the Cheltenham Festival. What luck you thought, but things didn't work out that way.
Yeah, just in time for the foot and mouth. So I was absolutely potless. Came back until every day I went to the cash machine in Thailand where I was staying, And I knew that the one day it refused to give me any more money, I'd have to come back. So I did. And I was hoping to come straight back in a few quid with the Cheltenham Festival. That was off the foot and mouth, so I ended up working in a perfume factory, putting stickers on bottles, because of course I got no qualifications, so can't do anything apart from what I knew, which was racing. So I learnt what boredom was for a couple of months.
Any particular brand of perfume? I think you're saying before it was Joe Malone, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. They used to make miniatures for hotels and things like that thing. But yeah, that was pretty mind-numbing. I've done some mind-numbing jobs in my time, and that was one of them.
So when racing returned eventually after foot and mouth, what did you find yourself doing? What did you get into?
I went back with Dave Phillips originally, who was the bookie I worked for before I left in time for Royal Ascot. And then I started working for Ivor Perry at the end of the summer full time. So then he was recently died, poor Ivor, but he was a Dorset farmer, and his daughter and son-in-law just taken over the business. They were looking for a full-time member of staff. So I worked for them on a self-employed basis, but we were going racing, averaging 18, 20 days a month around the local so far as sort of Worcester, Hereford, those sort of places. So yeah, it was great time. For 8 years I worked for them.
And with also, your first job there, how exactly did you... I mean, you've been working for them before, but what exactly was the sort of big chance you took that allowed you to go full-time with them?
What, Racecourse bookies?
Yeah.
I've just left the army, and I used to go racing, when I could, but not that regularly. But the local pub we used to drink out the Boar's Head, the landlord there used to work for bookies, and he taught me tic-tac before I'd ever been racing. So I learnt the tic-tac, and I used to go and sort of watch. He'd work with a floor man every now and again as a floor man, and I got a phone call one day, he wanted to play Skittles, and he said, can you go and work with Jack Lynn at Taunton? So I knew roughly what to do, so I went there. The very first bet they took, a lady came out, they had 500 quid on one at 4 to 5. And I looked, and Eddie Baxter, he used to trade his Avalon, he went 9 to 10, which was quite unusual at the time, but I said he's 9 to 10 up there. So the bookie opted off the still with a 450 to 500 back. They'd made 50 quid for nothing, and he said, you've earned this money with the first words you spoke, you're on the firm. So from then I was like the third man. When they couldn't get anybody else, I used to go with them. So that was 89, and that's where it started. Jack Lynn for 5-6 years.
What's the most vivid racecourse memory that you've got working on the pitches? Because as I understand it, you were there for the Magnificent Seven.
Yes, and that probably would be the most vivid memory, because I think my boss said, we could see it all unfolding, and my boss said, we'll stick up 3 to 1 or whatever it was. He said some mug might back it. Straight away, somebody straight in one of the firms, £500 or something, which was quite big for our firm at the time. He lost the most money he's ever lost in the racecourse, but we all cheered Frankie home, because we knew that it was something special that we were witnessing, and he'd get the money back. And incidentally, Ivor Perry, I worked for, his horse came fourth in that race. Ivor, I can't remember what it's called now, but it was fourth, so that was an interesting sort of connection there. But that was amazing. And actually, before racing, I think Tomo was interviewing Frankie Dettori, and Dettori said positive things about all his rides. Of course, I was far too professional to have gone and do a multiple, but I should have done.
the ones that got away. Right, so you got to spend a lot of time on the rails, obviously, and now you're sort of in the newer era of racing where a lot of stuff is done digitally, a lot of stuff is done online. Do you think that those on the pitches now have the same amount of skill as your Ivor Perrys would you need to in those days, as you would have needed to in those days, especially with the advent of the internet and the exchanges and everything?
Well, I mean, it's you can't even compare it now, because my job was a floor man, and the floor man is basically redundant these days. What the floor man did was stand in front of the bookies and watch all the other bookies. So you were in contact with your boss, you watch all the prices, you had to be alert all the time. You couldn't miss anything. If it was 6 to 4 everywhere and one person went 7 to 4, you might go 7 to 4 in a place, and they would decide if they wanted to go 7 to 4 or not. Or alternatively, you saw price collapsing, you'd show on the thumb. And then it would be dashing around. If they laid a big bet, they would sort of ask you to go and have a hedge bet, which was great fun. If they laid... My boss was quite a small layer, the first one. So they might ask you to go and have a 200 to 14 back with the fractions. You're rushing around. You call the bet into the bookmaker, just word of mouth. You didn't, they just wrote it in. You paid after the race all collected. That was brilliant fun. And the hustle and bustle, floormen running around everywhere. You had to know faces. So you got to know who was a mate of a certain trainer, who was a professional punter. All that sort of local knowledge was invaluable, for your boss. So the more you knew, the more valuable you were to be employed. And also, the market did make the odds. And sometimes some bookmakers would stick their necks out and try and get one in they didn't fancy. A lot of them had card markers of people's opinions. Brilliant fun. These days, obviously, the exchanges do sort of dictate things, and a lot of the floorman's gone. The exchanges are the floorman these days. The computer flashes up if the price is near the knuckle or it's starting to go. A lot of the fun's gone out of it. A lot of the excitement's gone out of it. And a lot of the cash punters, nearly all the professionals used to come racing. They would be having the bets on. You'd have big cash punters. And sometimes small bets were very significant. There'd be somebody that'd have a fiver on a certain trainer's horse, and if they did, everybody used to hop off their stool and have their own bet. So all that, the fun of it was just like a maelstrom for 10-15 minutes between each race, where it was all going off. And it's brilliant, so much fun. I absolutely loved it, and that's why I still persevere trying to promote the betting ring, even though we'll never get those days back.
Can you give us a really memorable bet that somebody had with you on one of those big hustle and bustle days?
Well, the most memorable bet wasn't even a hustle bustle. It was a midweek at Salisbury. I think it was probably firm going. There was a 2-horse race, and we'd gone 13-2 on. Guys come up, and he's wanted 13,000 on to win $2,000. This is with the Perrys, and they've laid him 6,500 to 1 on. You couldn't turn them down. And it's one half the track, And funnily enough, the guy afterwards said he was betting for the Injured Jockeys Fund. Now, I'm sure he's a fantasist, but that's the story he told us. So so think what he will about that. But that was the most interesting.
And one thing with the floorman, that's I'm a much younger person here, so forgive me for asking, but all these bookies in the same ring with their own floorman. Seeing each other, lay these bets and go and try and hedge their positions. Did you ever have people? I mean, there was a lot of camaraderie in the ring, but did you ever have particular bookies that you'd be happier to go to hedge your bets first, that you'd get a sort of better price or better deal from?
Yeah, everybody knew, not the pecking order, but everybody knew the size of the bookie, so they all knew the one I worked with. There's no point asking him for a £3,000 bet, but you knew where to go. I mean, Stephen Little in the ring would lay any bet you liked. He'd turn up in his mink coat and his driving in his Bentley to Taunton, places like that. And there was also some that would give you the bluff a bit. They didn't really want to take a back bet, because if they take a back bet, they know they've done it wrong, really. So what they would do, you get the bluff. So they'd look over the top of your head, and you'd be saying 200 to 1, and then he'd go, "Oh, sorry, what was that?" And then he would point to some guy down there, and so I've just laid it to this fella, and you get nothing. So you'd sort of get to know the ones that would give you the bluff every now and again. So yeah, that was part of the job as well, knowing which ones to ask for a bet and which ones might give you the bluff. So my boss used to say, all big bets bluffed. He didn't want them coming in even trying, so it was like...
Right, thank you very much for that part 1, and in part 2 we'll go on to racing in the modern era.